So here's what's on the show today. A preliminary inquiry, as released by the New York Times, is showing that the U.S. was indeed at fault for that Tomahawk missile striking the school or in the area around the school. It's actually kind of weird. Like, did it hit the school itself or next to it, whatever? We got some information on casualties in the war so far. So around 140 U.S. troops have been wounded so far, 8 of them severely. And we know right now, I think the number dead is still at 7. I think that's correct. And then we've got this new report out, this new story about the Department of War spending millions of dollars. Like the tagline is the millions of dollars on lobster and just various kinds of crab legs and things like that.
Fruit basket stands.
Things like that. But actually, the story behind what the other $90 billion was spent on in the month of September, I think, is way more interesting.
And that's a real picture.
No, that's not AI. It's a real thing. And then just another thing, I hope we get time to talk about a couple economic things. We're looking at waiving the Jones Act because of the potential oil shortage because of the Strait of Hormuz being basically closed right now.
Hey, real quick on the war before you dive into this. Are we sending troops in or not? What's your take on that? Are there going to be boots on the ground, as they say?
I believe there will be if we're going to achieve any of the stated objectives, unless they just decide that killing the elder Khamenei is like the win in the war. If they want to actually get the enriched uranium and things like that, they're going to have to send in at least special forces. And then once they look at that and they look at the fact that these are massive mountainous regions, they're also going to have to send a lot of support troops around them to send in the special forces. And so, yes, if they want to achieve any of the earlier stated objectives of the war, I think they'll have to. Unless they think they can just get away with stopping and calling it a win, which they might consider trying. But at that point, like, Iran's not going to stop striking, I don't think. I don't think they're going to be interested in that. And so then...
Well, I mainly bring that up because you talked about, or one of the stories goes into the injuries so far, 7 Americans dead, 140 wounded. If we send boots on the ground, which seems likely, that number is going to go way up. And so again, what's the point in this war?
Well, it's to protect America.
Well, yeah, of course.
That's why we're doing it. I don't know why you would even question that. It's clearly obvious.
Yeah, and these kids from, rural America signed up on the dotted line to die in Iran for our freedom.
Mm-hmm. So the story from New York Times this morning, this Tomahawk thing has been pretty wild. This whole Tomahawk saga that has happened. I've argued back and forth with people on X quite a lot. And so, yes, I believe the most likely thing that happened is that a Tomahawk hit this. It's an area that we were already bombing. It occurred around the time that we were bombing that area, that we were hitting it specifically with Tomahawks. And in the video, the missile itself looks
most like a Tomahawk.
There are still questions I have. I agree with what some people in the group have said. It doesn't look like the way a Tomahawk would come into a target. I didn't see the massive fireball I would have imagined. It looks like something was off with the whole thing. But regardless, from the New York Times, U.S. at fault in strike on school in Iran. Preliminary inquiry says.
Don't you love how they write headlines? U.S. at fault. Preliminary inquiry investigation.
Yeah. An ongoing military investigation has determined that the United States is responsible for a deadly Tomahawk missile strike on an Iranian elementary school, according to U.S. officials and others familiar with the preliminary findings. Now, the immediate cope from people on this, hey, just, go on the record here. We could turn out to be wrong on this. And I'm willing to accept that. I think if you were betting on something, if there were like Kalshi odds or a poly market setup for this right now, the highest likelihood would be that it was the U.S. that hit this. That doesn't mean that it was intentional. I don't think it was intentional. That's not the case that we've been trying to make. I think
Trump is not in the war room or on the phone with CENTCOM going, You see that school there?
Yeah.
Hit that one with a tomahawk.
Kids, hit those kids.
Yes.
Really strike fear in the hearts of the Iranians. I don't think that's what they were trying to do. I think that this was most likely a mistake. Let me go down through some of this. Officials emphasize that the findings are preliminary and there are important unanswered questions about why the outdated information had not been double checked. And so they are saying that they used outdated information. This school building used to be part of the military base. In 2016, they built a wall between the school building and the military base. And apparently they may have been using outdated information. But for the people that are still coping really hard on this right now, the preliminary report, these initial findings, they're basically saying, yeah, it was us that hit it. What the investigation is trying to find out right now is, how did this happen? Like, how did we not update our database? How did we not know that this was no longer part of the military base? How did that happen? They're not really in this entire piece, and you got to sort of trust the New York Times sources on this, of course. They're not really questioning whether or not it was the U.S. Tomahawk that hit it. They're questioning, how did this happen? That's what the investigation is now about. Striking a school full of children is sure to be recorded as one of the most devastating single military errors in recent decades. Iranian officials have said the death toll was at least 175 people, most of them children. The article goes in detail about who decides what needs to be a target, who's updating the database, who makes that decision, and this is where the investigation is happening. So that's just so you guys know, that's where we're at on this whole thing. Trump was asked about this morning.
New report says that the military investigation has found that the United States struck the school in Iran. As Commander-in-Chief, you take responsibility for that.
That is what?
As Commander-in-Chief, do you...
For what?
For the strike on the school in Iran. A new report says the military investigation has found it was the United States that struck the school.
I don't know about it.
Are you Mr. President, how do you respond to that?
I don't know about it. That's the answer on that.
We're going to let the investigation play out.
You know, I through all of my arguing with people online on this, of course, like some people would say, it sounds like you want it to be America that did it. You're just determined to say that it was America that did this. And that's not the case.
You love terrorism.
Yeah, like that's just not the case at all. I don't love the Iranians or anything like that. I just want the truth to come out, and I want the government to admit that they made a mistake. And that's actually what is best for America. And I had people making the argument. I was going back and forth.
Well, and then also acknowledge the kind of mistake that this is, which is something you can't come back from.
It's bad.
This is a mistake where you killed a school full of children that did nothing wrong by default. They're children. They did nothing wrong. And beyond an unfortunate error happened. So you have to acknowledge the mistake and the levity of that mistake and take accountability for both.
It's just like the point I was making is, it's better for you. It's better for you trying to get support and people trusting you to carry out this effort, to come out and say, that was unintentional. That was a mistake. We fired the guy that did this. We're very sorry. We wish we could take it back. We can't. We're going to make sure this is not going to happen again in the future. But then, looking like you're trying to hide it or trying to blame it on Iran, or then kind of saying, well, Iran's got Tomahawks, or there's many other countries with Tomahawks and things like that all just leads to more and more people distrusting you. So if you're some of these people who are concerned about the war effort, or as one person I was arguing with was super concerned about our next war already, like with China or whatever it was, I'm like, you want them to come out and admit these things. That actually makes them look better. People make mistakes, and this is a massive mistake, and it's terrible, which is why we should always try to not do these things in the first place. A lot of innocent people end up getting killed, but it's better overall for everyone if you just admit to that. It makes you look like a more trustworthy person when you admit that you did something so terrible. Like, who wants to admit that? You're so trustworthy that you would admit to doing this god-awful thing as an accident? Well, I would trust you more after you just come out and say that you did it.
Accountability.
Yeah, that's an important thing, and the government is not very good at that.
Instead, people are like, well, it's hard to see in the video. That could be Superman for all we know. You know, it's a bird, it's a plane.
I've got
Superman coming down on top of the school. Blame him.
Before we move on to the DOD thing, as it concerns a war, and we were talking about whether or not there's going to be ground troops and all that, I want everyone to, I keep seeing a lot of posts from people on the right and then even like semi-libertarians, right-leaning libertarians supporting this kind of thing. You know, they keep painting this rosy picture of how Iran's going to look, or our relationship with Iran, what the Middle East is going to look like, how this is going to be better for the world afterwards. And then they argue with you on the basis of like, well, you don't want the Middle East to be a peaceful place? Or like, you don't want the world to be at peace, or for us to not be worried about the Strait of Hormuz for this oil anymore? Or you don't want the Iranian people to be free? And seeing people who are super skeptical of government make that argument is a really weird thing to me, because in order to make that argument, you have to really, really trust that the U.S. government is going to be insanely successful at carrying out a very, very difficult, intricate, complicated task of like reordering another country and the entire region. And, you know, they can't even figure out like where the fraud is in Minnesota or whatever, you know, like that, but they're going to like reshape this entire region and then create this world peace. And I just wanted to make the point that it's good to be skeptical of these things, because while all of these rosy projections and pictures, they might sound great when you present it to me that way. Well, yeah, that does sound better. But oh, wait, the U.S. government is going to be carrying out this operation.
And we have,
they
like,
suck at everything.
We have
the
last 30 years of history to prove that they suck at this. Not one single Middle Eastern intervention has ever worked out with more peace in the Middle East. In fact, it's gotten worse.
Bad things just keep happening.
And you honestly, you could go back the last 50 years. You know, like it didn't work out when we instituted the Shah. It didn't work out in Iraq. Hasn't worked out in Libya. Hasn't worked out in Syria. It's not worked out anywhere. In fact, one could argue very easily, I think, that Israel, let's not take America off. Israel is less safe since all of these interventions than they used to be.
Yeah.
Back when, like think about this, in the 50s and 60s, there were tons of Christians in the region, in Iraq and Iran and Syria. They were all scattered throughout the Middle East, from Damascus to Baghdad to Tel Aviv to Tehran. In fact, I still think there's about 1 million Christians left in Iran. But back in the 50s and 60s, there were a lot more. And all it's done, all of the regime change and everything we've done from the CIA, all of these coups, has done nothing. History shows us that it's done nothing but make it less stable, less safe for everyone involved. So what is the objective here?
Well, Charlie, I know that all that may be correct, but you're forgetting that real regime change has never been tried.
Exactly.
As one of our Fed Haters Club members said last week. Now, it kind of reminded me why I was connecting this to the conversation about the strike on the school, because people will defend this or they'll say like it's okay because that's just kind of the cost of war. When you hear Dave Smith say something like the U.S. is the biggest terror regime in the world, or however it is that he said that, and people make the argument, well, we're not intentionally targeting citizens. Other people are targeting innocent civilians. And that may be the case, but we do still end up killing a ton of civilians and not achieving the objectives of the war that they sold you. And so while they can say, well, we're out there trying to do good, we're trying to do all these good things, and we don't target civilians do die, but the other people, they're just doing bad stuff. Well, guess what? I don't care what our noble objectives are. We haven't achieved any of them. We never achieve them. So at some point, you got to place blame on the people, those people as well. They just keep saying that we're going to achieve this noble objective. It never happens, but a lot of people die in the meantime. At some point, you got to ask yourself, like, are you liable for that? Are you liable for supporting that, even if you said that it's like a socialist wanting to help people by instituting a wealth tax or something like that, or Medicare for all. And like, oh, a lot of people died, but the ideas were great behind the whole thing. At some point you could be like, no, but your ideas are terrible,
robbing
man.
a bank to house the homeless.
Yeah.
It's like, well, they had all this money in the bank, and my objective was to house the homeless, and look at all these homes now that the homeless have. It doesn't matter. The actions themselves were immoral.
Oh, the actions were immoral, but the outcomes are always immoral. It's like if I'm a terrible driver, but I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to go help out of the homeless shelter, or I'm going to go help at a kid's foster care center. And I left and I ended up hitting a school bus full of kids on my way there, and they all died. And I'm like, oh, dang it. It was an accident. I was on my way to go do something, and I got a new car the next week. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go help those foster kids as I was going to help. And on the way there, I ended up hitting the van full of the old ladies on their way to a quilt convention and something like that. And then I just keep doing that over and over again. I never, ever achieve the objective at all. Or eventually I pull up to the foster care center, but I forget to hit the brake and I just drive straight through the entire thing and kill all the kids. Eventually got to say, dude, I know that you're saying you want to help, but clearly you should know you need to stop driving that damn car. Just stop doing this. You're not helping. And so at some point, I think I would be the bad guy in that scenario.
Yeah.
I just think that would be the case.
It's the whole, the end justifying the means. And I would argue,
but you never get to the end.
Well, I know. But I would also argue the means in this case are not necessarily moral means.
No.
You're dropping bombs.
So we've got this other story here, moving on from some of the war stuff. To be clear here, I think a lot of people are focusing on sort of the low-hanging fruit baskets.
Yeah, the bottom feeders.
Yeah. They're focusing on the easiest things to get upset about. As you got a text from your brother talking about the millions spent on lobster, fruit baskets, whatever. And I get it. Okay, so the TMZ headline is Pete Hegseth blew billions on fruit baskets and lobster. Now, actually, if you add up all the numbers from that, it's probably didn't spend billions on fruit baskets and lobster. But you guys get the idea. So they're talking about all the money they spent on these things. Now, in this article, they do point out some ridiculous things, though. So
this is only, by the way, fruit baskets and lobster is like a fraction of the spending that you should actually be upset about.
Yeah, that's kind of when you told me what Trey sent you, I was like, okay, yeah, that was like $20 million of the thing, but there's another $90 billion here that we should be way more upset about, and the manner they went about spending this, and the reason that they spent all of that money, which, by the way, is because when you're working on these budgets, as everyone knows, if you don't use it, you lose it. And so by
the way, this is not just the Department of War or the Pentagon. This happens in every government agency.
Yeah. It happens in private businesses too, but they try to not do that. Like your department needs to use your budget for this thing, but more so in government for sure. So it says Pete Hegseth's Defense Department reportedly blew through tens of billions in 1 month, including huge splurges on steak, lobster, crab, fruit baskets, and furniture, according to recent analysis by the government watchdog Open the Books. The Pentagon went on an epic spending spree in September 2025 by burning through $93 billion, the most at the end of a fiscal year since 2008. All part of the federal government's use it or lose it budget. I didn't know they actually said that right there. Hegseth's DOD needed to spend the money to keep their current funding moving forward. Then he signed off on the $6.9 million for lobster tail, $2 million for Alaskan king crab, $15 million for ribeye steak, $1 million for salmon.
Support the farmers, Nate.
Well, yeah, that's part of it too, of course. But there's a lot of troops. Maybe you got to feed the troops healthy stuff. I don't want them just eating slop all the time.
$140,000 for donuts.
Okay, then there's the donuts too.
Which, by the way, I mean that's not very many Krispy Kreme.
That's not a whole lot.
I think they would spend more.
It's not a whole lot.
That they're a little more. Well, maybe this is his slimmed down version of the police force, though.
Yeah, $124,000 for ice cream machines. And then, by the way, they dropped $225 million on furniture, including $12,000 for fruit basket stands. Under Hegseth, there's other things that I think are more ridiculous. $3.5 billion for cable TV, $5.3 million spent on Apple devices, $4 million going towards Samsung devices. And then here's some ridiculous stuff. $1.8 million on musical instruments, including $100,000 for a Steinway grand piano for the Air Force Chief of Staff's home.
In his home.
I don't care what excuses anyone wants to make about how, well, you know, crab's actually good for you. You know, lobster's got a lot of protein or whatever.
Or we got to boost the morale of the troops and give them a nice dinner every now and then.
This is just them trying to find ways to spend money, and no taxpayer should ever have their money taken at the point of a gun to put a $100,000 grand piano in the home of an Air Force Chief of Staff. You also should not be forced to pay for a $26,000 $26,000 violin. One violin at the cost of $26,000 or $21,000 for a handmade Japanese flute. There's no excuses for that. Those are impeachable offenses, in my opinion. Okay? Like,
even if whoever got the flute was a, certified flute master.
Yeah. Doesn't matter. I don't care. You can buy his own flute. Go to eBay. There's a lot of flutes on there. I guarantee you.
A handmade Japanese flute have to do with the Department of War?
Yeah.
The thing that makes me the maddest in that list is the $100,000 Steinway and Sons. Granted, amazing piano.
It's a great piano.
Those grand pianos, they're gorgeous. They sound great. However, we're spending $100,000 on that piano, not to it's not like in the foyer of the Pentagon or something. No, this is in literally the Air Force Chief of Staff's home. And by the way, that's just the piano. They had to get it in there. Yeah. Probably took a crane. That happens a lot, especially if it's upstairs. We pay for these people to live like kings.
Mm-hmm.
All the while, you're struggling to buy bread and milk and gas now. It certainly doesn't seem like America first.
I want to go through some of the stuff from Open the Books because it's not so much all the money on the food or whatever. The money on the violin and the piano and stuff, that's a lot more infuriating to me. But it's the entire structure itself, and you can actually see it in chart form really easily, that they know that they have to use this money at the end of the fiscal year, or potentially it could be cut out of the budget next year. So a lot of times what happens is they will just find things to blow money on, and this is your money, or it's your children's money or your grandkids' money.
Yeah, because we don't have any money anyway.
Yeah, we don't have the money, so it's you're still going to pay for it one way or another, though, but they are terrified that their budget might get cut or, God forbid, could even stay the same the next year. That would just be awful, And so they just find a way to spend all of it. Let me go through. See, Open the Books has tracked the annual September spending bonanza for nearly a decade. Military spending has spiked every year, regardless of which party controlled the White House. However, there has never been anything quite like September 2025, when $93.4 billion was spent on grants and contracts.
Now, remember, they did a recension package of $9 billion, so 10% of what the DOD spent in the month of September 2025.
They rescinded, and then they later refunded about half of that.
Yeah.
So
I just want people to put it in perspective.
Yeah. And there was like a fight over that. That barely passed.
Barely.
That package barely passed. In the last 5 working days of September alone, the DOD spent $50 billion on grants and contracts. That's more than the annual defense budget of countries like Israel and Italy.
By the way, that's $10 billion a day. Monday,
check
10
your
billion.
math on that.
Tuesday, 10 billion.
It's a lot. In fact, there are only 9 foreign countries that spend that much on their military an entire year. These amounts only include money sent to entities outside the government, not salaries for service members and scores of other expenses. These are just grants and contracts. There's just not all the other internal
that goes
expenses.
Out, by the way.
That's leaving. Okay. let's see. Instead, the shopping spree encompasses luxury food items. We know that. I don't want to go through all the food items again. I want to show you guys this graph. This graph disgusts me. Can't stand it. Because what you see highlighted on these white lines here is the month of September. And you see there's a spike every single September. They didn't need to spend that much all of the other months, but somehow magically they have to do that every September. And that is them saying, that's them looking at you, the American people, and saying, F you. That's what they're saying. We have your money. There's a potential we could spend less, but we're just going to spend it on couches or something like that. We're just going to spend it right now at the end of the fiscal year because we can't possibly survive without this money next year. And they could have survived because they didn't need it until the last 5 days of the month before the next budget started. It was not integral to the operations of the DOD or the DOW, as they're calling it these days.
DOW.
W.
Dow.
Dow, yeah.
We heard that's important.
Yeah, the Dow was up to 50 billion in the last 5 days of the month right there. Furniture is near the top of the military's wish list at the end of every fiscal year. Since 2008, the DoD has spent an average of $257 million on furniture every September. A 564% increase above the norm. In months, like above the norm the other months of the year. In months besides September, furniture costs the military only $38 million a month on average. Guys, what the hell are they doing with all this furniture?
Don't know.
I was going to yell. I was going to slam my hands on the table. But in this case, I'm so confused about where all this furniture is going. Every month, guys, that's not they did it this year. And then they're going to be good stewards of your money. And 5 years after the couch wears out, they're going to replace it again. That's $40 million a month on furniture.
Everywhere you go, Nate, they have a lot of buildings. You got to have somewhere to sit.
Even then, at some point, are you telling me there is never a point in time that the DOD's buildings are considered fully furnished? They never, it's like a forever furnishing. They only do forever things, forever wars, forever furnishings. It never stops.
Here's the opportunity, though. If you start a furniture company specifically for the DOD, you'd be wildly successful. You only have to sell in September, by the way.
It's like you
for the whole year.
Packing up your bags. You're like, Mom, I'm moving out east. She's like, honey, where are you going? Well, I'm going to fulfill my dream. I'm going to sell couches at the DOD.
DOW.
At the DOW.
Yeah. I've already got a $100 million contract, Mom. Don't worry. I haven't built nothing yet.
Look at these spikes. Look at these September spikes in furniture. I want to know where the couches are going. I just want to know.
Well,
I'm perplexed.
You're anti-American
by
if
this.
You want to know these answers. Nate.
I need someone. I'm actually confused by this. I'm sure there's a rational explanation. And
now, here's what I find fascinating. When the left tries to rail against these billionaires, right, who actually produce valuable things that we all consume, they're really upset. And they, like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, these guys could solve world hunger. They could end homelessness, all of these things. What I find so interesting about the left is that they don't realize that government is literally the biggest corporation of all. Like, it's literally incorporated. Government is incorporated. And if you look at these kinds of numbers and you're like, they can have these sentiments towards like private companies or even publicly traded companies that offer a lot of value. And yet they see the government do something like this and it just doesn't even faze them. In fact, they want the government to be bigger.
They do.
The government's not spending enough money. The problem is the Department of War is not buying couches for the homeless. Because they don't have the money for it. So we need to steal more money from the billionaires to give it to the Department of War so that they can buy couches for the homeless soldiers on our streets.
That all checks out to me. The purchases include
precision guided furniture. See, Nate, what you don't understand about this furniture is that, precision guided.
Yeah. The $60,000 worth of chairs from premium furniture manufacturer Herman Miller, including at least one order of their luxurious Aeron chair for $1,800. Another $12,000 paid for 3-tiered fruit basket stands. Where are you going to put your fruit? How can you survive if they're not in baskets? That's the question that we all have to be asking right now. This is ridiculous. And anytime they tell you, which they're about to tell you, and we are about to get the biggest military budget once again that we've ever had. Trump's going to come and ask for tens of billions of dollars more to help fund this war effort. Again, it's going to happen. And then we're going to keep raising the defense budget every single year. By the way, we got to replace all the stuff that you guys see videos of us shooting. It's not just the cost of the missiles and the bombs that we're blowing up right now, because those costs were paid many years ago. Now we're going to pay even higher costs to replace all of those things. All the stuff that we're doing right now is going to have to get replaced. This is going to cause higher and higher budgets for years to come, and not counting the new wars that we start in those years for years to come. It's just a ever expanding budget and they'll tell you, like, you got to have it. If you don't want to increase that budget, then you don't support the troops. You know, you want them just sitting on the ground, sleeping on the ground, eating cans of off-brand ravioli or something like that. Is that what you really want? And no, dude, I want you to keep that couch at least through the manufacturer's warranty. Okay? That's what I want you to do.
You don't have to trade it in every month. They probably don't even trade it in.
I'm
They're
confused about the furniture.
Where's the leftover, by the way? They're ordering this much new furniture. Where does the old furniture go?
How is America not surviving itself on the DOD's secondhand furniture? No one in America should have to buy furniture ever again.
Does it go to Goodwill? Like, where does it go?
It's got to be in a warehouse next to the cheese. It has to be next to the government cheese. There's a billion pounds of cheese, and there's 1 trillion pounds of furniture. And we're going to, someday when we hit the next depression, they're going to release the strategic furniture reserves in order to help the American economy make it by. That's the only answer I have.
Yeah, it's the only thing that makes sense.
That's all I know. Okay. I think I've exhausted every impromptu joke I can on this whole thing. The war, the ticker is going, just so you know, allegedly at $11.6 billion on the current war. 2,000. I thought this page was interesting. 7 killed, 140 wounded for the U.S. Over 2,000 killed of the Iranian military. And this website, Iran cost ticker, 1,200 killed, 12,000 wounded Iranian civilians. And a lot of people will tell you, well, that's war, baby. That's just something's going to happen. It sucks. We don't want it to happen, but we're not targeting those people intentionally, you know. And I say, for this to have any potential of working at all, the people of Iran are going to have to want to rally behind the American and Israeli flags and take over their country. And it just ain't going to happen while you're out there killing a bunch of their kids. And which is why it still leads me to believe that, like, there are people involved in this war that do not want that to happen, that they want this conflict to last a long time. Maybe not forever, but for a long time.
Well,
and
yeah. I mean, it behooves them to have war perpetually going on because that keeps money flowing into their coffers.
Yeah.
You're looking at defense contractors, the people who make ballistics, Raytheon, Boeing, you name it. The military industrial complex, they love it, just like Lindsey Graham does.
Something else that's dumb that wasn't going to make it, and that not dumb enough to make it the dumb bleep of the week, is this thing concerning the Jones Act. This comes from Reason. Trump is considering waiving the Jones Act for oil shipments. We got this issue, getting oil tankers.
So why do we
out
have
of the
it?
Strait? We have it. This genius idea is that if you made a law that said between U.S. ports, one U.S. port to another U.S. port, there's got to be a U.S.-built ship and owned and operated and staffed primarily by U.S. people, by Americans, because this is America.
Yeah.
And the intention was The rosy intention in this case was this is going to help bolster U.S. ship manufacturing. It's good for jobs. The only thing it ends up being good for
are
unions and higher prices for people. Like it's about the only thing, because we've got like less ships than we had at that time. And not really at that time. We've got the number of ships has decreased over the last 20 to 30 years. But they are considering waiving this, which is them admitting that this imposes costs on everyone. Of course, everyone knows it imposes costs on anyone. But this is like where Tennessee throws a tax-free weekend as like an economic stimulus for
twice
people.
A year, baby.
Twice a year we get tax-free weekend. And I love it because it's them just admitting how much this hurts the economy and how much harder it is for people to go out and buy the things that they need. There was a ridiculous example in this whole thing, because I think we've you guys know, I'm sure, listening what the Jones Act is. Don't need us to explain it. But under the Merchant Marine Act of 1920, more commonly called the Jones Act, cargo shipped between two U.S. ports must be carried by ships that were built in America and are primarily owned and staffed by Americans. As a result, oil pumped in Alaska can only be transported to the U.S. mainland by a small subset of available vessels, making it much more difficult and expensive to do so. Americans pay more for certain energy products like natural gas, even when it's produced here, which is just a ridiculous thing. In order to protect this industry that, on the whole, employs a small amount of people and would be a very small amount of the economy, the entire economy suffers as a result, because you could just use a non-U.S. built ship staffed by non-U.S. people, and it pulls up to Alaska and it gets the stuff, and then it brings it down to a U.S.
because
port.
they're willing to do it for cheaper.
And then it's the entire thing is cheaper, and it's better for everyone in the U.S. economy, instead of just trying to favor the company that owns that one ship that has the capability of doing this. The logic behind the law was that restrictions on foreign competition would, among other things, encourage the development of a strong U.S. shipbuilding sector. This guy from Cato said in 2019, but rather than prospering, U.S. shipyards have been in a decline for decades, and there are only a mere handful that build ocean-going commercial ships. That may seem a head-scratcher to some, given the Jones Act U.S. build requirement, but it makes more sense when one considers that these ships cost up to 5 times more than equivalent vessels. I want to get to this thing with Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. Let me find that. Give me a second.
There you go. In fact, Puerto Rico.
Yeah. Trump himself waived the Jones Act for Puerto Rico in 2017 after Hurricane Maria hit the island. The waiver was for 10 days. In fact, Puerto Rico provides a perfect example of why the Jones Act is counterproductive, even in peacetime. The law makes Puerto Rico pay more for liquefied natural gas than its neighbor, the Dominican Republic. There currently exists no LNG tanker compliant with the Jones Act. So even though the Dominican Republic can buy LNG from the U.S., Puerto Rico, which is a U.S. territory, buys its LNG from foreign countries, including Russia.
Sounds American first to me, baby.
Pretty close to each other, but they don't have a U.S. ship because it's Puerto Rico. They can go from U.S. to U.S. territory, so instead they got to buy from overseas.
Why don't they buy it from the Dominican Republic?
Well, I don't know. I mean,
just have a little pass-through pipe.
It's a decent idea. California was passing stuff through, where was it? The Bahamas or something like that. One of those islands over there. I'm not sure. There's like basically they just change ships over there, you know.
Even adding a small surcharge for a pass-through would still be cheaper.
Yeah.
Plus, we're obviously supporting Russia's natural gas here.
Actually, they just pass through because they'll go to a non-U.S. territory, and then they'll do the paperwork, and then they'll leave and go to the U.S. territory after that. And then it's technically not shipped from U.S. to U.S. It's shipped from like Bahamas to U.S. or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
Guys, it's a ridiculous thing. People should get rid of it. It's one of the many examples of how the government just makes things more expensive.
Well, what's weird is that the president has the power to waive it for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
So I like the title of that headline for the article, which is, instead of just waiving it, why don't we just repeal it? Mm-hmm. It's like what is it, 100-year-old law?
100 and it said 1920, so yeah.
By the way,
106 years.
The crazy thing about we put these laws on the book, and what does it have to do with actually being America first or protecting Americans. It's absolutely insane. This is why government sucks.
Well, that is just a good general principle to have.
I don't know what else to say. We're about to get hit with a thunderstorm.
Yep.
So we got to go before we
go.
get cut off. And we hope you guys enjoyed. I keep saying that. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I meant at least the entertainment of it all. The stuff we're talking about is not super enjoyable.
No.
But hey, hopefully you're more informed than you were 2 days ago. And that's the whole point. So thank you all for tuning in, sharing the show. Do what Nate said about YouTube. If you want to support the show with your dollars, then head to joingml.com to be part of the Fed Haters Club, or you can support the sponsors that support this show by visiting the links in the show notes. Easy access to support them if you skipped over their ad during the normal course of this podcast. So do all those things or don't. I don't really care, but Nate does. So if you do, then we'll be back again tomorrow or Friday. Until then, I hope you have a good day and a good morning, Liberty.